Jack London was born January 12, 1876, in San Francisco, California. He was an American novelist and a short story writer, and some of his best known works are The Call of the Wild and White Fang. They depict elemental struggles for survival. At a young age, he was deserted by his father. He was raised by his mother and stepfather in Oakland, California. At the age 14, he quit school to escape poverty and gain adventure. He explored San Francisco Bay, and most of the time he was stealing oysters or working for government fish patrol. He went to Japan as a sailor and saw much of the United States as a hobo riding freight trains. And as a member of Charles D. Kelly's Industrial Army, London saw depression conditions and was jailed for vagrancy, and in 1894 became a militant socialist. London educated himself at public libraries with the writings of Charles Darwin and Karl Marx. At 19, he crammed a 4-year high school course into 1 year and entered the University of California, Berkeley. But after a year, he quit school to seek a fortune in the Klondike Gold Rush. Returning the next year, still poor and unable to find work, he decided to earn a living as a writer. London studied magazines and then set himself a daily schedule of producing sonnets, ballads, jokes, anecdotes, adventure stories, or horror stories, steadily increasing his output. The optimism and energy with which he attacked his task are best conveyed in his autobiography. Within 2 years, his stories of Alaskan adventures began to win acceptance for the fresh subject matter. During the remainder of his life, London wrote and published steadily, completing some 50 books of fiction and non-fiction in 17 years. Although he became the highest paid writer, he was never freed of the urgency for writing and wanting more money. Jack London died November 22nd, 1916.
A man travels in the Yukon on an extremely cold morning with a husky wolf dog as his companion. The cold, however, does not faze the man, a newcomer to the Yukon, who plans to meet his friends by 6 o'clock at an old claim. As it grows colder, he realizes his unprotected cheekbones will freeze, but he does not pay too much attention to it. He walks up along a creek trail, mindful of the dangerous, concealed springs. Even getting wet feet on such a cold day is extremely dangerous. He stops for lunch and builds a fire. The man then continues on, in a seemingly safe spot, falls through the snow and wets himself up to his shins. The man curses his luck. Starting a fire and drying his foot gear will delay him at least an hour. His feet and fingers go numb, but he starts the fire. He remembers the old-timer from Sulphur Creek who had warned him that no man should travel in the Klondike alone when the temperature was 50 degrees below zero. The man unties his icy moccasins, but before he can cut the frozen strings on them, clumps of snow from the spruce tree above fall down and snuff out the fire. Though building a fire in the open would have been wiser, it had been easier for the man to take twigs from the spruce tree and drop them directly below onto the fire. Each time he pulled a twig, he had slightly agitated the tree, until, at this point, a bough high up had capsized its load of snow. It capsized lower boughs in turn until a small avalanche had blotted out the fire. The man is scared and sets himself to build a new fire, aware that he is already going to lose a few toes from frostbite. He gathers twigs and grasses, his fingers numb and nearly lifeless. He unsuccessfully attempts to light a match. He grabs all his matches, 70, and lights them simultaneously, then sets fire to a piece of bark. He starts the fire, but in trying to protect it from pieces of moss, it soon goes out. The man decides to kill the dog who is his companion on this cold, cold journey. He puts his hands inside its warm body to restore its circulation. He calls out to the dog, but something fearful and strange in his voice frightens the dog. The dog finally comes forward, and the man grabs it in his arms. But he cannot kill the dog. He is unable to pull out a knife or even throttle the animal. He lets it go. The man realizes that the frostbite is now less a worrisome prospect than death. He panics. He runs along the creek trail, trying to restore circulation, the dog at his heel, but his endurance is out. Finally, he falls, and cannot rise. He fights against the thought of his body freezing, but it is too powerful a vision, and he runs again. He falls again, and makes one last panic run, and falls once more. He decided he should meet death in a more dignified manner, and imagines his friends finding his body tomorrow, alone, through the hostile environment of the Yukon and sub-freezing temperatures, falls victim to the unrelenting and unforgiving power of nature. During his journey, the man gets his feet wet as he falls through the ice into the water of a hot spring. Because of the severity of the cold, some 170 degrees below freezing point, the man's life depends on his ability to promptly light a fire to keep his feet from freezing. After one half-successful fire-starting endeavor and several other pitiful attempts, the hopelessness of the man's lone struggle against the hostile environment of the Yukon begins to become apparent. After a lengthy episode of panic, in which the man tries desperately to return feeling to his extremities by running around like a chicken with his head cut off, the man at last grows calm and decides to meet his death with dignity. The story's central theme is one that man lives a solitary existence, which is subject to the relentless, unforgiving forces of nature. An ever so subtle part of the theme is that man's goal is to find meaning in his existence. The lone man traveling across the bleak, unfriendly expanse of the Yukon can come to be seen as a solitary individual who inhabits a cruel and indifferent cosmos. The remoteness of the Yukon wilderness, as well as the absence of a human travel companion for the man, serve to illustrate the existentialist idea that the man is alone in the universe. The dog is not a sentient being as man himself is, and cannot therefore be looked upon as being a kindred spirit who shares the bitter existence of the lone lost soul who is the protagonist. The heartless indifference of nature exemplifies the theme of the story of man's living a solitary existence in a harmful universe. This story's theme speaks of man's need to find meaning in the sufferings of his solitary existence and in an environment which is both hostile and indifferent to his sufferings.